10 days before launch, a huge dump of information about No Man's Sky was released on Reddit by a guy called Damien, who revealed, among other things, that the quest to reach the center of the galaxy was much shorter than fans had imagined, and in general, there just wasn't that much to the game. Developer Hello Games quickly responded to the growing firestorm, first with a tweet from the co-founder of the studio, Sean Murray, asking people not to spoil all the secrets they've put into it, and then later with a more direct message saying that the content of the leaks isn't representative of the final game. 10 days later, No Man's Sky came out on August 9th, 2016, and the leaks were proven to be almost entirely correct. The final game was missing a significant amount of the promised features that fans were expecting, like landing on asteroids, playing as a trader, or even basic things like rivers, or actually functional portals, being able to interact with other players, just multiplayer at all. The list goes on. The damning thing about it all was that this wasn't pie-in-the-sky fan projecting. Someone actually bothered to create a massive list of the things missing from the original release version of the game, with receipts, links to various articles, direct quotes from Hello Games and Sean Murray, or links to pre-release footage. There was a lot that was promised in the lead up to the release, and players had no reason not to expect to see this stuff in the final game, so when it wasn't there, a lot of people were understandably upset. This being the internet, of course, people took things too far. Someone went so far as to hack the Hello Games Twitter account, there were death threats, all that kind of stuff. The internet has a long history of getting way too intense about video games to an unhealthy degree, and No Man's Sky was kind of the perfect storm for that kind of behavior. For one thing, it was a space game, which always seems to bring out the types who will write 1,000 to 100,000 word essays that are meticulously researched about a game's relative strengths or failures. Look at Starfield or Star Citizen, games that just draw on some strangely intense dudes. Not an insult, just the truth. These guys do not play. Now, No Man's Sky got a lot of hype with Sony in charge of the game's marketing. There were commercials everywhere, and I mean everywhere. But at the same time, nobody really knew what the game was going to be. But what do you do was a meme for a reason. Nobody really understood what the actual game was. We were mostly seeing a lot of features and learning about the game's procedural generation, but the actual gameplay loop was left intentionally vague. That vagueness, combined with the intense marketing push, meant that there were a lot of people hyped for the game, imagining all the infinite possibilities they could dream up, along with a whole lot of other people who were just sick of hearing about it and thought all the marketing sounded like a lot of BS, so the entire game ended up being fertile grounds for drama, and oh boy, was there a lot of it. Even with all the anger and confusion surrounding the leaks, the final product had to just at least be good, right? Well, unfortunately, it wasn't. Even looking past all the things the game was missing, there really was not a lot that was engaging there. If No Man's Sky had been released as an indie game on early access for $30, I don't think people would have minded it, but this is a $60 game that was backed by Sony. So a lot of people assumed that it had AAA funding behind it. It didn't. And a massive development team. Also, it didn't. The reviews were middling and the fan backlash was intense. There were a lot of people who were legitimately very angry about the state of this game. So at that point, Hello Games had two options. Either give up the game completely or try and fix it. The thing is, there really just wasn't any option at all. Hello Games had to rehabilitate their reputation after the launch. They had to reassure their fan base that they were serious about supporting the game, It was make it or break it. And even though they were committed to continuously supporting the game, it was still a huge gamble for the devs. For as financially successful as No Man's Sky was, there was no guarantee that continuously supporting the game for potentially years with free updates would actually pay off. It was entirely possible. The fan base would move on to something else. It's a volatile industry. Also, the game sucked. That's a big element that may have contributed to fan drift, so to speak, but hindsight says that Hello Games absolutely made the right decision, sticking with the game, despite how murky it looked back in 2016. But Hello Games had to show they were serious about improving No Man's Sky. They went dark for a little while before releasing their first major update, late November 2016, a few months after the initial disastrous launch. It was the 1.10 Foundation update. It had a lot of the significant changes to the terrain generation. It brought a lot of improvements to the space gameplay. It added base building. It was a promising start, and they just kept going. 1.20 Pathfinder added Exocraft. 1.30 added a new main story. 1.5 Next was the name of the update. Made huge sweeping changes to universe generation. Core crafting materials were totally revamped, and they added in player avatars that you could create, and finally a rudimentary form of multiplayer. And the huge game-changing updates just kept going. It's 2025 now, and there's been 31, not minor, major named updates to No Man's Sky. And what's especially impressive about how fast they release, they're consistent, and they have been for a long time now, nearly a decade. And in contrast to most games, they just show no signs of slowing down. Updates are actually coming out faster in recent years compared to the early days. What's even more remarkable is that these updates, for one thing, they're completely free. And another is that the game, after 9 years, has absolutely no microtransactions of any kind. There's no in-game store, no season pass, there's nothing extra to buy, there's no subscriptions. You buy the game and that's it, you have the game. It would have been so easy for them to take in the path of least resistance and start selling ships and resource packages, insert all kinds of live service crap into the game, and they just never did. All they did was just continue to support the game for years after most reasonable devs would have moved on, and for that, Hello Games deserves some serious respect. In 2025, No Man's Sky is without a doubt in a better state than where it was in 2016. I mean, hell, by 2020, fans were already saying the game finally did all the stuff they promised before release, and then some, but I've found some Reddit threads that are 7 years old, filled with people praising Hello Games for how much they've been supporting the game. And that would have only been 2 years after release, around the time of 1.50, the next update where they first added multiplayer, which was nothing compared to the Beyond update from 2019 that added full ambient multiplayer, up to 32 player support, and a multiplayer hub that expanded on the Anomaly space station. All these updates were so much bigger than what I've mentioned. There's tons and tons of these things, and not all of them make sweeping gameplay changes, to be fair, but a lot of them do. Beyond was one of the biggest. Along with the added multiplayer support, they added VR support. They completely revamped missions and the tutorial. They heavily rebalanced gameplay and the tech trees, new aliens, new NPCs, creature writing. Seriously, the list keeps going. And that was one update. And all this support completely revamped Hello Games and No Man's Sky's image. It's akin to how other games have managed to turn things around, like Final Fantasy XIV or Cyberpunk 2077. But the difference is that Hello Games isn't a massive developer. Even now, this far in, they're a relatively small outfit, which makes what they managed to do with No Man's Sky that much more impressive. Everything they've added up to this point culminates at update 5.50, the Worlds Apart 2 update, the 31st named update to the game, and the 233rd update overall. This patch, which was released on the 29th of January last month, January 2025, makes some pretty major changes to the way worlds are generated, making an even more varied and interesting universe to explore. They've completely overhauled the lighting system, which makes the game look much more dramatic and just flat out better overall. They've added a ton of flora and fauna to large bodies of water, which now, by the way, have really dangerous sea creatures lurking in them, as well as special resources. They've added new biomes to existing planets, created entirely new planet types like ginormous gas giants, supersized terrestrial worlds, ice planets, ruined planets, and water worlds that are nothing but oceans. Along with that, they've improved water simulation to make the already good-looking waves even more realistic. They've improved compatibility for mods. They've finally added a way to sort items to your inventory. You can store extra ships in cold storage. There's new purple star types. As usual, it's a lot. I almost struggle reading these lists of updates because it's just so much crap here at once. It's constant support like this, too, that makes No Man's Sky the game that it is. One that is in a significantly better place than where it was when it was launched back in 2016. For all the praise I've been heaping on the game, it is important to keep things in perspective, though. All these improvements and updates make No Man's Sky a better game, but at the core, it's still essentially the same resource-finding game it was back in 2016, just with a much wider set of features to play around with. For all that they've added to the game, there's not a lot of depth to the gameplay. It's pretty surface level in a lot of ways. It's also got its fair share of bugs and quirks that get in the way of the fun sometimes, like how many of the new features included with this patch actually require you to complete the main story before you can actually access them. Things like gas giants and the water worlds and relic worlds, they're only found in purple stars, which only become available after you've completed the main story and engaged with the new short quest line that includes some of the new features of the patch. So if you just want to immediately check out a gas giant from a fresh save, that ain't happening, which seems odd, but the stated reason is because Hello Games doesn't want to interfere too much with the already created worlds. Only, if you look around online, it's pretty clear a lot of these changes have affected player worlds and turns people beautiful paradise planets into swamps. It's kind of a messy situation right now, but that comes with the territory when you got a game that gets as updated as often as this one, and is also as old as this one at this point. There's gonna be rough patches, especially when some something new drops. When No Man's Sky first launched, the universe was empty, planets were flat, lifeless places without much going on, and space was pretty much just an empty expanse. Now, in 2025, planets are rich with life, there's unique biomes and greater visual variety, space is full of NPCs, freighters, pirates, space stations, you can build a fleet, you can recruit companions, you can build a base, you can pilot a variety of vehicles, there's multiple storylines to follow, secrets to uncover, factions to work for or against, there's multiplayer that's transformed how people play the game, there's new threats and anomalies and gameplay systems and all kinds of stuff. The amount they've added in No Man's Sky, it's staggering to behold, and it's almost impossible to list. Seriously, I remember one thing and then there's like 10 more things I forgot about. The lists of updates are just daunting, like I said. After all this, I mean, we're past the point of forgiving Hello Games for the pre-release transgressions. Sure, Sean Murray probably could have cooled it with the high-flying promises. He's partially responsible for the unreasonable expectations, but Sony was also part of the problem. They pushed the game hard as a revolutionary new game and priced it at $60, which sets expectations way higher than an indie game that isn't quite complete yet. Like seriously, before No Man's Sky, Hello Games, they had Joe Danger 1 and 2. They went from making a $15 motorcycle platformer to a space game with literally infinite possibilities. Sony didn't help with the marketing, you know? And it also probably didn't help that they had a deal with Sony and Sony was like, you're gonna say this, this, and this. How much of it was Sony and how much of it was Sean Murray? I don't know. How much of it was just getting excited and saying too much? How much of it was stuff they wanted to do? How much of it was actually just straight up a lie? Who really knows? There's a lot of stuff that we don't know. But in the end, it worked out. Those initial sales are probably what allowed Hello Games to continue to support the game at all. If the hype hadn't been there and the game didn't get to those kinds of sales at launch, it probably wouldn't be supported today. I mean, it's possible, but the big surge of money probably helped because according to Hello Games, they essentially had to release the game when they did because they were out of money. It was either push No Man's Sky out or cancel it. Sony wanted a 2016 release date and Hello Games gave it to them. The contradiction at the core of No Man's Sky is that, well, the game, it's good now. It wasn't when it first launched. Do we really want to reward developers for releasing bad games and then fixing them later? You could make the philosophical argument that developers and publishers shouldn't be rewarded for pushing out unfinished games like CD Projekt Red did with Cyberpunk. Praising a game that's improved is giving publishers the tacit endorsement to keep putting out broken and unfinished games at launch because everyone will look the other way if the game is fixed. It's an argument I understand, but also, I mean, stuff doesn't go like this every time. And it's not like people weren't mad when No Man's Sky came out. They definitely got the brunt of it, let's say. That said, the game's good now. Who really cares what it used to be like? It's not 2016 anymore, and we're talking about a game in 2025 as it exists now in 2025. So call No Man's Sky as of 2016 shit if you want to, but the game today is no doubt way better and deserves the praise it's gotten, especially because they have continued to support the game without inserting any unwanted crap like live service junk or microtransactions. They still fulfilled their promises with ambitious updates like multiplayer support. It's not that complicated. When a game launches and it's bad, say it. When a game gets fixed, acknowledge that too. It's not like every crappy game that comes out gets fixed. Most of them don't. No Man's Sky isn't unusual because it originally released in an unfinished state. It's unusual because they didn't just spend years fixing it. They continued to support the game far past the point where they reasonably had to. This isn't just a game for these guys. No Man's Sky is clearly a labor of love, and while it's not a game that's going to be everyone's cup of tea, that's what Hello Games wanted to make, and that's the sort of unvarnished enthusiasm you just rarely see in games as high profile as this. So let's give them a little salute today and leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is of course a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter and book me on Cameo at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.